I think hopefully we're paying attention whenever you hear about all of these attempts to move woke ideology and woke literature from the culture. Really all that is just an attempt, to remove things that speak to the atrocity that was slavery.
Yeah.
To dilute that.
So true.
To water it down, to minimize its level of harm and impact generationally on us, or anything that really speaks to why African Americans will have a grievance with inequities that are still being practiced. And so I just think, man, the attempt, literally, there's a category of literature that is being outlawed.
Mercy.
You know what I'm saying? That are being removed from circulation in an attempt to remove the history. And so I just think that for every African American parent, grandparent, teacher, pastor, church leader, like this, we have to be sounding this alarm.
Life can be fast-paced, strenuous, and flat-out overwhelming. Life transitions and taboo topics can make it hard to catch your breath. Welcome to Breathe, a podcast that enables you to slow down, get your bearings, and engage in real conversations where no topic is off limits. Breathe is presented by Breath of Life, hosted by David Person and speaker-director Pastor Debleaire Snell.
Boom!
Hey. Let's go.
What's up?
Man.
We are glad to be here for another episode of Breathe. Pastor Debleaire Snell.
Yeah.
Pastor Kirk Nugent.
Yes, sir.
And David Person. Good to be here with you.
Good to be
Excited
here.
to be back.
And, we've been on this, on the new normals train
That's
all
right.
month. But
That's
we
right.
did not forget
Yeah.
that it is Black History Month.
It's Black History Month.
BHM, baby.
So
Come
we
on.
want to talk a little bit about Black history because, we are Black.
Yeah.
We don't just wear black.
Yeah,
We are
yeah,
Black.
yeah.
And so we want to talk a little bit about Black history to wrap up the month of February, to nod to that this great month that we have been celebrating now. 100 years?
That's
Is
right.
that
That's right.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I'm glad you pointed that out earlier off
Yeah.
mic. Yeah. So what does Black history mean to you, Pastor?
Yeah, so, let me just say that so that it does not come across as exclusive or elite.
Yeah.
Black history is actually American history.
Agreed.
In the context of North America. I mean,
Right.
it's American history. The reason that we have had to really make it a point of emphasis is simply because culturally, there has been attempts to erase, modify, reshape what the experience of African Americans has been in these United States. And I think to look to try to shape or reshape the triumph of African American history is actually to subtract in part from the victory that is the United States.
Agreed.
And so I just think that because of the unwillingness to acknowledge, to include, there has been a particular emphasis on kind of creating context for how we got here, what the experience has been, and to provide context for where we are now. And let me just say this, because I think that when you look at where African Americans are, let's just say, just on the larger hierarchy in terms of like socially, financially, economically, educationally, in certain areas we may be in, even though we're growing and there's progress, we're in kind of the bottom of certain certain
Social
categories,
economic
right?
indicators,
But see, this is why I think history matters. Because if you divorce that from history, it feeds a narrative of Black inferiority.
Yes.
That says, man, they're at the bottom educationally, financially, housing, employment, health, da-da-da-da. But if you divorce that from history, what we have endured, not just during the period of slavery, but the systems that have been put in place to ensure Black poverty, brokenness, limitation of rights or participation in society, then you kind of it's not an excuse, but you understand how it is that we got here.
Yeah.
Why we celebrate the accomplishments that we do celebrate,
Right.
And why we hold some of the values that we do have.
Yeah.
And so I just think that's why it really, truly does matter, just on all fronts that we celebrate Black history.
So Black people, there's archaeological evidence that strongly, I think, proves that people of African descent were on this continent, and consequently in the area that we now call the United States of America and Mexico, South America, the Caribbean, before Columbus.
Yeah.
But for many people, we mark it at 1619.
Sure. Yeah.
Which
Jamestown.
is over 400 years ago. Because that's when the first slaves were imported here to this part of the world, into this hemisphere. But if you now fast forward, from 1619 to 1865, which is when slavery ended, more or less. I mean, we know because of Juneteenth, it really didn't end everywhere, but it ended at least most places in theory. And then you go from 1865 to 1965, a 100-year period where Jim Crow reigned, and defined life for Black people, the descendants of slaves. And
segregation, Black codes,
all of that. And then you go from 1965 to where we are now, 2026.
Sure.
You realize we've only had about 51 years, generationally, 51 years. That's about a generation or maybe generation and a half.
Yeah.
Where we have really been truly legally. Legally.
That's not socially.
Not socially, but legally allowed to participate in society as full-fledged citizens. Now, that's not to say that those legal rights have not been under assault.
Sure.
They've been under assault legally.
Yep.
They've been under assault socially. So to your point, you cannot examine the social economic indicators as it relates to the wealth gap, the education gap, and other things, other
employment,
metrics.
all of it,
other metrics, housing.
Or even
metrics.
just the state of the family.
Right. The state of the family. We lament the absence of Black fathers. Well, you can't examine those things honestly, intellectually, without accounting for over 400 years of specifically targeted discrimination that was legal, that was social, and that often was supplemented by the killing and the raping of our people.
As deterrents
to
keep you from pursuing these inalienable rights.
That's right.
that all men have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
It's crazy that we are doing this episode on the heels of the last episode, talking about ignorance.
Good point.
Because
good point.
This is again what some of the stuff that you just shared a second ago, David. I mean, people would need to go and dig to verify some of those details. Not saying that they're not true. I'm just saying this information is publicly available.
Right.
And you should dig.
So that you don't show up to some of these kinds of conversations with ignorance. Because the pushback naturally for Black History Month is some of what you said. But it's because maybe you haven't done the homework.
Sure.
Maybe you're not showing up to the conversation, well read, well informed, with history to back what you are saying. So I just wanted to kind of make that link between the two. I think there's something to be said, and I think especially for our community that practices verbal tradition, we do have to have these conversations to ensure that we hold space for that knowledge to be had and to spark that fire to say, let me go and do some digging of my own.
And I just think even just for the bolstering or reinforcing of our own identity.
Agreed.
It's critical. I think, with each generation, it's funny. There are so many different stereotypes about us that are pushed, through narratives, through media, and some of it is of our own doing, unfortunately.
Very true. Very true.
But I just think that, there needs to be a time where, we can call back and show our children that some of the major innovations.
There it is.
And it's not a small portion.
No.
In fact, many of the major innovations that make America what it is, we were the progenitors of that.
Yeah.
We were the inventors. We were thought leaders. We were strategists. And I just think that, man, that does a lot, to help us realize that, man, if we were able to prosper and thrive or be this innovative and industrious under these circumstances, with some of the privilege and opportunity that there is now, those things don't have to stop. We shouldn't have to just continue to read history. We should be consistently writing and making history.
So good. There it is. There it is. And I think we should recommend some content for people to digest. One that immediately jumps to mind for me is this movie that the rapper Mos Def starred in called "Something That the Lord Made."
Phenomenal.
And it's a beautiful story. I can't remember the name.
It's based on a
character.
Yeah, it's based on a historical character, a surgeon.
A black man who was really the brains and the hands behind major medical innovations. But of course, because of the time, because this was during the Jim Crow era, it was the white doctor who he assisted who got the credit. And that's not the only time in history. They say the same thing is true as it relates to Lewis Latimer and Thomas Edison. Same thing.
Same thing.
Same kind of scenario.
Sure. Yeah.
But people need to see a movie like that, or what is the movie that Oprah
Hidden Figures.
Well, Hidden Figures is one, definitely.
Yeah.
And of course we're in the Rocket
right here in
City,
Rocket City, yeah.
So that really resonates with us.
It's
Hidden
his
Figures,
home for sure.
The women who were the mathematical brains behind things that are related to
those computations,
and,
right?
And there are books out there that can be read, but people need to. And I thank God for my parents made sure that at an early age, I was given that kind of content to read.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you all remember the big giant books called Great Negroes. Past
Oh
and
yes.
Present.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
I had one of those early. And learned about Benjamin
you taking me
Banneker.
back now, man.
Oh yeah.
Taking me back.
George Washington Carver, Percy Julian, and also some celebrities and so forth. But some of these people who shaped science and culture in this country.
But I think that and the reason I think that is so critical, especially not just for the young generation, but for every age group, is when you look at so let's just say an average high school public high school history book or American history book, the civil rights movement, I've seen it, will be whittled down to maybe a chapter, maybe 2 or 3 pages, and it all revolves around Martin Luther King, maybe a subtle mention of Harriet Tubman. And I just think that even right now, I think hopefully we're paying attention whenever you hear about all of these attempts to move woke ideology and woke literature from the culture. Really all that is just an attempt, to remove things that speak to the atrocity that was slavery, to dilute that,
so true,
to water it down, to minimize its level of harm and impact generationally on us, or anything that really speaks to why African Americans will have a grievance with inequities that are still being practiced. And so I just think, man, the attempt, literally, there's a category of literature that is being outlawed.
Mercy.
You know what I'm saying? That are being removed from circulation
Yes.
in an attempt to remove the history. And so I just think that for every African-American parent, grandparent, teacher, pastor, church leader, like this, we have to be sounding this alarm.
Preach,
Like
preach.
I mean, every other culture, like they are determined to preserve their own history, to make sure it, they're not going.
Agree.
It's funny because even when even here, I was involved with a group of it was an ecumenical biracial movement during the George Floyd time where there was a speaking to or calling out of white supremacy, so on and so forth. But it's interesting how when we got down into the weeds of it, right, and we began kind of having these conversations about what white supremacy is and the Confederacy, So there was a group here in town. I don't want to say too much, it was disappointing in light of how it started. But like, man, there was this whole goal, the sons of the Confederacy. You know what I'm saying? And they want to still hold it up as a value because in their mind, this is our history, and we don't want our history done away with. And my thing is, okay, if you're gonna try to hold up and what's the term? Reframe that history.
Man.
You mean you're going to try to tell me it's wrong for us to hold on, show value and appreciation for our history?
That's right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're going to categorize my history as some threatening mechanism to American life and identity, yet we're going to hold that up as something that needs to be remembered, memorialized in various ways, shapes, and forms. So I'm saying all that to say, like, this idea of Black history, it ought to maybe crest in February. Maybe it ought to be the catalyst for conversations in February.
Right.
But in African-American homes in these days and times, it should not be limited to the month of February.
At all. It should be year-round.
Yeah.
Year-round.
That's
Year-round. I wanted so many great things to respond to or to touch on, but I want to get this in. Something that Dave said in thanking your parents, I want to say the same as well. I want to say a word of affirmation and thanks to my parents, but from a different context. My parents are Jamaican, and came to the United States right before I was born. So my older brother actually was born in Jamaica, but my parents, unlike many of our counterparts, and I can say this, I'm going to say it. You know, unlike many of our counterparts, my parents
I know what you're saying.
were very intent on us, their children, who are Black American, knowing the culture and the history of the people upon whose backs we now get to enjoy these freedoms. They took us to, we went to every museum in Georgia. We've gone to so many different, my parents were big on that. We watched all the movies, all the different contexts. We would sit and have conversations. They wanted us to know this history as well, because we're Maroons from Jamaica. They wanted us to know that history. They wanted us to know both. And I'm saying, just as you said, this is not a 1 month thing. If this is your story,
that's the word history.
This is your story. And if you're going to understand you and your context, you need to understand, of course, the culture within which you live and have pride in that. But then you also need to understand the culture from which you came, that birthed you. And so I think that's a critically important thing. I wanted to interject there as well.
Absolutely, man. God bless your parents.
Amen.
And by the way, I'm glad I'm able to say, since you brought up the Maroons, I actually went to Maroon Town.
Come on.
The first time I went to Jamaica.
Come on.
That was we went up this, we were in this bus and went up this mountain.
St. Mary.
Went up there and found out, interestingly enough, and for those of you who don't know what we're talking about with the Maroons, Google it. It's a very powerful story about Jamaican resistance. Resistance of Black Jamaicans. But came to find out that they had a little Seventh-day Adventist church up there.
They do.
Oh, man.
They do. They do.
Yeah,
Wow.
they actually pointed it out to
That's
me.
right.
Okay.
Listen, I know exactly where you were. That's crazy. That is crazy. But I just feel like, as Pastor Snell is saying, look, these conversations should be, they shouldn't be a one-off.
Or because what will happen is we will start to also devalue our own institutions.
Agreed.
So, there are these dialogues, and it's probably cyclical that will kind of say, why do we have black churches, black denominations, or black colleges and universities, so on and so forth? Why are you creating segregation? So that's why the history matters, not just to the larger culture, but for even our own young people.
Yes.
Like the only reason there is, I guess, quote unquote, black conferences in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, or a missionary Baptist group, or a African Methodist component. Do you realize that every split of religion, like the reason you have sections, or it all revolves around race.
That's it.
Like
that's it.
The reason you got branches and sections of Baptists, Assemblies, Pentecostals, it's all about inclusion. Where African Americans wanted to be included, wanted to be accepted, and they'll say, okay, we'll let you embrace the ideas, but in terms of next to each other, worship, fellowship, brotherhood, so on and so forth. Like the reason that we, even in our church, we have conferences and, and Oakwood is simply because, when there was an attempt for us to be included, to be one, we were given the Heisman.
That's right.
And the only way to survive was to create your own
mercy.
And I just think even this idea that sometimes gets pervasive in our culture, that in order to measure yourself against the best, you've got to go to a PWI, and if that's where God calls you to go, more power to you. But it's an errant idea that in order to have the best or be measured against the best, I've got to go there. When the truth is, when I look at some of the people that have graduated from this little HBCU that only boasts of enrollment of about 1,100 to 2,000, depending on when you were here, they are doing, we do major things in every field across the world.
Oakwood.
Yeah. So I'm gonna be in Homer right now, but the same could be said of A&M or you're right, Howard or Tuskegee, Stillman, wherever, so on and so forth. So I'm just saying all that to say, like we can celebrate kind of our own the institutions that served us when no other institutions would.
That's right. And to make sure people get the full context in terms of the formulation of these entities, God bless the white people, because in many cases it was white people who either had the vision to create these, to educate former slaves.
No, you're correct.
Or if they didn't have, or they supported the vision financially.
You're right.
So we thank God for the fact that this is not just a story of black people doing for black people.
Well,
it's also,
and it's why we say it's American history.
American history.
That's right.
Because the great part of the the civil rights movement is you just had courageous young white people, Jewish people who gave their lives,
some of them
risked their lives,
That's right.
because the cause of injustice rang in their souls with such conviction that they couldn't be still and couldn't be silent.
Couldn't agree with that more.
You brought up the Sons of the Confederacy, and I wanted us to, and I know we're out of time, so I'm going to make this quick. For those who question why we often in these conversations will position the Confederacy as a bad thing, you need to look at the famous cornerstone speech that was given by Alexander Stephens, vice president of the Confederacy in the lead up to the Civil War. And I'm just going to briefly paraphrase it. What he basically said was the Confederacy was founded specifically to subjugate black people and to perpetuate slavery and to protect that institution.
That's right.
So anytime anybody comes at me with trying to value the Confederacy, my response is not only was it a traitorous organization, a traitorous government, but it was also a government whose sole purpose, according to the vice president, was to keep us enslaved.
Wow.
To keep our ancestors enslaved.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right, we're out of time now, but we wanted to touch on Black history. As Pastor Nugent said, this is really a good connector to the previous episode where we talked about making ignorance abnormal.
Yeah.
So let's make ignorance about American history and Black history abnormal.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
I love that.
And if I could just admonish anybody that has, again, well, first of all, for yourself,
Yes.
make it maybe just a part of your study normal for the month of February, but not just then, but just, maybe give it maybe a little more of an intense study.
Right.
And this is not just for our Black listeners, whether you're Asian or a Latino or Caucasian, like this is our history.
Yeah, that's right.
But I just think it's especially important that if you are the leader or overseer of a home with Black children or grandchildren, I just think that because the narratives that are being formed can be so dense and so strong. Like, no, we're not just athletes or entertainers or just this ghetto group. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, see, there's a difference between even ghetto culture and Black culture.
Yeah.
We've made that the same thing.
They conflate them.
You see what I'm saying? And I'm saying, I just think it's really important that we have these conversations, that we talk and just share with them. It's more than Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman. Like, you had other people that made major contributions through, their gifts of thought and writing and literature and science. And so I am burdened for us to really pass that down as Israel did from one generation to the next. They literally put biblically mechanisms in place to make sure that the history never got erased, diluted, or forgotten.
That's right. That's right.
And I know we're landing. I couldn't agree with you more. As you study, as you look at Black history, you're going to find some of the history. You're going to find the past, the stories, the very real circumstances that people live through. But then you will also have a myriad of other stories, little known, that are equally as powerful.
Yeah.
And some of them not as jarring, right? The people always go to Obama when we think about current Black history, but there's a lot of other people who are making history today.
That's right.
That you can also include in your study and in your focus as you seek to look into to make sure that you're not ignorant around these topics.
That's right. That's right. I'm going to give you a homework assignment.
Okay.
Yeah. I want you all to, in addition to digesting everything that we've talked about today and doing your due diligence in terms of research, I want you to research the name Viola Liuzzo.
Liuzzo.
She is the only white woman who was assassinated working for the cause of civil rights.
Mercy.
The only one that we know of. Let me say that. The only one that we know of. Viola Liuzzo. I want you to also research William Moore, one of the several white men who was assassinated protesting for the rights of Black people. So this is not just about Black heroes, even though we celebrate Black heroes unabashedly and unashamedly. There were white heroes and heroines also. All right. God bless you. Don't forget, as you move now from the month of February into March, stop, pray, and breathe.
Breathe is produced by David Person for Breath of Life. Executive producer is Debleaire Snell, and sound engineer is Kirk Nugent. Audio episodes of Breathe can be found on Apple, Spotify, or Google Podcast platforms. For video episodes and extra content, check out the Breath of Life YouTube channel. Breath of Life is faith-based content, resources, and programs from a contemporary urban perspective for those looking for hope and guidance. We believe that every breath we take is a testimony that God is consistent, that He loves us, and has a plan for our lives.